What if you died and got reincarnated again, and again, and again? What if dying wasn't the end, but only the beginning of another nightmare? Serena has already lived 3 miserable lives. In one life she worked herself to death. In another she was destined to become a villainess. And in the third she died as a human experiment. Now she wakes up again, back inside the body of the same villainess whose fate is already sealed. Divorced, hated, and surrounded by enemies. But this time, Serena isn't planning to follow the story's ending. Serena found herself lost in thought once again. No matter how much she tried to rationalize it, everything still felt overwhelming. People often said that reincarnation was a rare blessing, something that might never happen even once. Yet she had already experienced it 3 times. Each life had carried its own hardships, its own unique weight. Because of that, there had once been a time when she desperately wished for everything to end. But when her eyes opened again, she had been reborn into a 4th life. She could not understand how such a thing had happened. And to make matters worse, the situation was far from ideal. Once again, she had been written into the role of a villainess. Serena Lavernia. Her first life had been nothing short of miserable. Back then, she had essentially lived like a slave in disguise. In truth, she had been a graduate student surviving on a painfully small salary of 400,000 won. For years, she had worked like a servant under her demanding advisor. Night after night, she had pushed herself far beyond her limits. Endless work, sleepless nights, and constant pressure slowly destroyed her body, until one day her vision blurred. Dizziness took over, and eventually, she collapsed and died from sheer exhaustion. In that fleeting moment between life and death, a desperate prayer escaped from the depths of her heart. She begged God, if he truly existed, that in her next life she might be born into a rich family. A life without studying, without labor, without servitude, and it seemed that her wish had been granted. In her second life, she opened her eyes as the eldest daughter of the prestigious Lavernia family, a noble household known for its wealth and influence. It felt like she had been handed a golden ticket to life itself. Serena Lavernia. Her name was spoken with admiration. Her childhood was filled with luxury, comfort, and privilege. For the first time, she truly believed that life might finally be kind to her. But that belief shattered the moment she heard a certain name. One day, she had been formally introduced to someone. Her father informed her that her fiancé had arrived. Then a young man stepped forward. He introduced himself. Magnus von Kelleheinem. The moment Serena heard that name, a sinking feeling gripped her chest, because she had heard it before. Not in this life, but in a novel she had read during her first life. Magnus was not just anyone. He was the second male lead in a romance fantasy novel called Luck, Saint, and Fame. And the villainess in that very story was Serena Lavernia. Serena's breath caught as the memories surfaced. The villainess in the novel had been cruel, arrogant, and filled with malice. She had committed countless sins against the saintess, scheming, poisoning, even plotting murder. And in the end, she always met a horrifying fate. The novel described 4 different endings for her. In one, she died from poison while imprisoned. In another, she met a tragic death after kidnapping a child. In the third, madness completely consumed her mind. And in the worst ending of all, she was executed by quartering. Every possible ending was miserable. And Magnus, her supposed fiancé, played a central role in her downfall. In every version of the story, he despised her for tormenting the saintess. Their engagement, arranged by their families, was eventually broken. But he did not stop there. Magnus personally made sure that Serena lost everything. Her reputation, her status, her future. He destroyed it all. So when Serena met Magnus in her second life, fear immediately filled her heart. A terrifying thought echoed inside her mind. What if the story still happened exactly the same way? What if everything she loved, her comfort, her peace, her happiness, collapsed in an instant because of some unavoidable cliché? That was when she began thinking carefully. In the novel, Serena Lavernia had not always been a villainess. She only turned wicked after her debut in high society, when she met the saintess at the age of 16. But at that moment, Serena herself was only 8 years old, which meant the story had not begun yet. And that realization sparked a small hope. Maybe the future could be changed. If she never met the saintess, then the tragedy would never begin. The cliché could be avoided. With that determination, Serena made a decision. She would live quietly. No arrogance. No cruelty. No unnecessary attention. She would treat Magnus kindly, avoid conflicts, and maintain a peaceful life. Then, before the story could even begin, she would escape. Serena decided that once she turned 15, she would ask her family to allow her to enter a convent. And after a great deal of persistence, her parents finally agreed. By the time her 15th birthday arrived, Serena successfully entered the convent. For the first time in years, she finally felt relief. She believed she had escaped the story. She believed she was safe from every terrible ending. But fate had other plans. One day, while traveling by carriage, disaster struck. Without warning, the carriage lost control. The vehicle tumbled violently down a cliff, and Serena's consciousness faded away. When her eyes opened again, confusion flooded her mind. She clearly remembered the carriage falling. So why was she still alive? Where was she? Before she could understand anything, a man suddenly appeared. His voice was sharp and irritated. He demanded to know how long she planned to stand around doing nothing. Then he called a name, Gil, as if that name belonged to her. Still confused, Serena tried to respond. But the man continued speaking impatiently, asking for a report he had apparently requested earlier. This time, she had been reborn as the assistant of a medieval professor obsessed with dangerous experiments. In her first life, she had been exhausted from endless studying. And yet here she was again, forced to do the same thing. Her third life did not last very long. War eventually broke out, and the professor, her master, forced her to accompany him. He claimed it was his dying wish, and warned that if she refused, death would await her anyway. Confused and unwilling, Serena reluctantly agreed. But what followed was pure betrayal. One day, the professor pushed her into a strange chamber. With excitement in his eyes, he declared that she would become the first subject to test his newly built teleportation device. Serena desperately protested, but the professor was far too afraid to test the machine himself. So instead, he used her. Just like that, she became nothing more than a disposable test subject for his insane experiment. And soon after, death claimed her once again, for the third time. At that moment, Serena made one final wish. She no longer asked for wealth. She no longer wanted comfort. All she wanted was rest. She begged for eternal peace. But when her consciousness returned once again, something felt strangely familiar. Slowly, she opened her eyes. Her body felt familiar. When she looked into a nearby mirror, the reflection staring back at her revealed the truth. Serena Lavernia. She had returned to that body again. But time had clearly passed. She was no longer the child she once was. Now she had grown into adulthood, and the dread filling her heart was unbearable. Had the carriage accident failed to kill her? Had the original Serena continued living after that moment? Had she gone on to become the villainess exactly as the novel described? If that was true, then it was already too late. The villainous ending had already begun. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the castle, voices echoed through the halls. A man asked if Serena was still confined in the annex. Another voice confirmed that she was. Orders were given immediately. She was to remain under strict surveillance. Under no circumstances should she be allowed to cause more trouble. And most importantly, the divorce agreement still needed to be signed. Back in her isolated room, Serena lay quietly on the bed. Her mind was in complete chaos. But one thought repeated itself again and again. She was absolutely doomed. When the morning light filtered into the annex chamber, Serena walked to the window and slowly drew the curtains apart. Sunlight poured into the room, spreading across the floor and illuminating the quiet courtyard outside. At its center stood a graceful fountain. For a moment, Serena simply stared at it. The sight felt strangely familiar, like something from a distant memory. Gradually, old recollections began surfacing. Memories from the first time she had visited the Kelahinem Duke's estate. She had discovered something unexpected. Companionship. It was the first place where she had experienced warmth, where she had met friends, where, for a short time, she had tasted a fragile kind of happiness. For someone who had never truly been embraced, that memory felt like a bittersweet treasure. Reality returned just as quickly. She was not standing in the heart of the Duke's estate. She was trapped in its abandoned annex, a residence meant only for those who had been cast aside. A According to the original story, Serena was supposed to become the Duchess. She should have been living proudly beside Magnus. But her current situation told a very different story. If she had been exiled to the Annex, then the divorce discussions had likely already begun. And judging by everything around her, she must have resisted them, which was why she had been confined here. That realization made her chest feel heavy. It meant more than a decade had passed since the carriage accident. The very accident that had marked the beginning of Serena's descent into villainy. Serena slowly collapsed back onto the bed. Her eyes stared blankly at the ceiling. Dark thoughts crept into her mind. In every one of her past reincarnations, misery had been the final outcome. 3 lives had already ended in failure. And now here she was again, back in the same body, facing the same doomed story. A question echoed inside her heart. Was death as the villainous truly unavoidable? Was this cruel cycle something she could never escape? Her hands slowly clenched into fists. Desperation rose within her chest. Then suddenly Serena sat up. Her eyes sharpened with determination. No, she refused to die like this. The worst had not happened yet. And if the very bottom still lay ahead, then perhaps there was still time to change something. Her thoughts turned toward the original story. She remembered exactly how Serena Lavernia had fallen. Magnus had eventually reached his limit. Unable to tolerate her wicked actions any longer, he had demanded a divorce. Once her cruelty became public knowledge, her own family abandoned her. They stripped away her title, her wealth, her protection. And just like that, she was left with nothing. A disgraced noble with nowhere to go. The memory burned fiercely in Serena's mind. The last time she had tried to change the story, she failed. Back when she was 15. But this time would be different. This time she would succeed. She silently made a vow to herself. She would reshape her future. And this life would finally be lived peacefully. When the maids arrived, they looked noticeably nervous. Their voices trembled as they carefully asked what she needed. Serena looked at them calmly. Then she gave a simple instruction. She needed to go to the main mansion. The maids visibly stiffened. Discomfort spread across their faces. But none of them dared to refuse. Inside the main mansion, the atmosphere was strangely restless. Lottie, the newly appointed household butler, immediately noticed the unusual disorder. Servants were whispering among themselves. Others were lingering in the halls instead of returning to their duties. Lottie frowned. He demanded to know why everyone had abandoned their work. But before anyone could answer him, his gaze shifted toward the entrance. And that was when he saw her, the woman everyone in the mansion feared. Serena. She stood calmly in the hall, her presence alone making the air feel heavier. One of the attendants hurriedly explained the situation. She had not been allowed to enter. The Duke had given strict orders that she was forbidden from entering the mansion. They had already apologized to her and repeated the order. Entry was not permitted. Lottie's expression darkened. Why had someone who was supposed to remain in the annex come here? Rumors about Serena immediately resurfaced in his mind. Stories every servant in the mansion had heard. She had dismissed countless servants without mercy. She had publicly humiliated rivals at social gatherings. Some even whispered that she had physically harmed people she disliked. But her greatest crime was far worse. She had offended the crown princess. If the princess had not shown mercy, Serena would have already been executed. In Lottie's mind, she was nothing but a disgrace to the Kelahinem name. Still, protocol demanded politeness, so he approached her respectfully. He greeted her as the lady of the house. Serena looked at him quietly. Then she asked about the former butler, Pamel. Lottie explained that he had taken over the position because Pamel had grown too old to continue serving. Serena listened silently. Then she nodded slightly. Even in her childhood, Pamel had already seemed quite old. It was only natural that a successor would eventually replace him. But then Serena said something unexpected. Since Lottie was now the butler, authority rested with him, which meant he could allow her to enter the mansion. She explained calmly that she wanted to meet her husband, and that she was ready to comply with the request he had made earlier. Shock flashed across Lottie's face. The request? Did she mean the divorce? Serena's calm expression gave him the answer. She wanted to resolve the matter quickly. Then she politely asked if she could wait in the drawing room until Magnus arrived. All of this was said with a gentle smile. But that smile revealed absolutely nothing about what she was truly thinking. As Serena waited quietly in the entrance hall, her thoughts drifted once again. She now understood something clearly. The hatred directed toward her was far greater than she had expected, which meant her first priority was obvious. She needed to finalize the divorce as soon as possible. Only then could she finally gain her freedom. After that, she planned to travel to the Lavernia estate. There was something hidden there. Emergency funds she had secretly saved during her childhood. Her presence only brought disgrace to the family now. So leaving them behind would be her own decision. She began imagining a different future. Using the herbal medicine knowledge she had gained from her previous lives, she could start a small business somewhere quiet. A simple life, peaceful, free from interference. But another concern soon troubled her thoughts. The crimes committed in this body's name. Even if she had not personally committed them, the world still believed she had. That meant those accusations could become dangerous. What if someone holding a grudge decided to take revenge? For her own safety, those stains would need to disappear. Just as she was thinking about this, a familiar voice suddenly spoke behind her. A voice that sounded both aged and gentle. Serena slowly turned around. Standing there was Pamel, the old head butler who had once faithfully served the family. 10 long years had passed since their last meeting. Time had carved deep wrinkles across his face, but his eyes still carried the same loyalty she remembered. Seeing him stirred something unexpected inside Serena's chest. She had thought her heart had long grown numb from suffering. Yet for some reason, the sight of him warmed her slightly. Pamel greeted her with the same loyalty as before. However, to anyone listening nearby, the conversation might have sounded quite different. Serena spoke politely, but her words about his age and continued service could easily be misunderstood. To outsiders, it might have sounded like quiet disdain, as if she were saying his presence was no longer welcome, as if she wished he would retire soon so she would not have to see him again. Naturally, whispers began spreading through the mansion. Servants carried the story from one hall to another, until eventually the news reached the Duke himself. Serena Lavernia had come to the mansion, and she was asking for the divorce. When Magnus heard this, disbelief filled his expression. Anger quickly followed. He immediately demanded confirmation. Had she truly said that? He could not understand it. She had refused the divorce countless times before, so why would she suddenly agree now? Suspicion rose in his mind instantly, because to Magnus, there was only one possible explanation. Serena Lavernia was plotting something again. Yet beneath that anger, fragments of memory slowly began to stir. His thoughts drifted back to a time when Serena had been a completely different person. Back when she had been young, innocent, and surprisingly kind as his fiancée. In those days, they often sat beneath the shade of an old tree, speaking as though life stretched endlessly before them. He remembered one conversation clearly. He had once mentioned hearing rumors about the second prince of the Mule Kingdom raising a rebellion. He explained the situation thoughtfully, already analyzing possible strategies. Serena's reaction had been pure admiration. She looked at him with shining eyes and said it was impressive that he even knew such things. She complimented his intelligence. Then she joked that it was no wonder so many people wanted to pull him closer to the royal palace. But along with that praise, she had also shown concern. She gently told him that even someone as capable as him needed rest, and that he should take care of himself. Back then, despite their engagement being political in nature, Serena had seemed warm, kind, someone he could honestly say he liked. But everything changed 2 years later. Without warning, Serena left for the convent. Then not long after returning, she suffered a terrible accident. Her injuries were so severe that most people believed she would not survive. Yet somehow she did. Miraculously, she recovered. But when she returned, she was no longer the same person. It felt as if someone completely different had taken her place. The warmth she once carried disappeared. Instead, she began pursuing the crown prince. She ignored her fiancé entirely. And worse still, she openly harassed the crown princess. Even after becoming duchess, her behavior only grew more dangerous. Whispers spread through high society, rumors of schemes, and even talk of poison being placed in the crown princess's cup. Recalling all of this, the Duke muttered quietly to Pamel, his loyal attendant. He wondered what trouble Serena was causing now. Pamel responded cautiously. According to him, nothing unusual had happened in the mansion that day. The Duke immediately dismissed that answer. He insisted Serena could never remain quiet, not without stirring some kind of chaos. But as he thought about it further, something strange occurred to him. The mansion did not show its usual signs of destruction. No shattered decorations. No frightened cries from servants. There was not even the faint scent of blood in the air. The Duke frowned. It was difficult to believe Serena could remain this calm. Suspicion quickly replaced his anger. If she was quiet, then she must be planning something far worse. Eventually, he decided to see for himself. When the Duke and Pamela entered the drawing room, they immediately spotted Serena. She sat calmly on the sofa, reading a book. The Duke froze for a moment. This peaceful figure looked nothing like the chaos he expected. Serena glanced up briefly. Then she spoke casually to Pamela. If there were any cookies left, she asked that they be brought to her. Pamela bowed politely and agreed. The Duke stared at him in disbelief. Then he abruptly turned toward Pamela. Was Serena being starved in the annex? Pamela immediately denied the accusation. He insisted that nothing like that had happened. The Duke felt irritation rising again. But then another thought crossed his mind. Since Serena herself had said she wanted the divorce, perhaps she had simply not had time to cause trouble yet. If that was the case, then it would be better to resolve everything quickly and remove her from his life for good. Meanwhile, Serena quietly observed him. Her thoughts wandered in a completely different direction. Since childhood, she had always considered him handsome. But now, with maturity and experience, he had grown even more striking. A small thought slipped through her mind. Surely many young women had shed tears over him. Finally, she spoke. She remarked that it had been a long time since they last met. Then she politely asked if he had been well. The Duke's expression remained cold. He replied that it was surprising she could still speak such words so casually. The response made Serena pause. A faint regret surfaced inside her. Perhaps she had said something unnecessary. Her thoughts sank into quiet reflection. She remembered the terrible things she had done. All the cruel actions. Even the attempt to poison someone. Yet when she traced her life further back, she found only pain. In another life, she had lived as a research slave. Even as Lady Serena, she had never truly received her father's affection. Hatred had followed her everywhere. So why did her chest feel slightly tight now? Why did she feel unsettled when she had grown so used to being despised? Her thoughts were suddenly interrupted. The Duke reminded her coldly why she was there. Had she not come for the divorce? Serena nodded calmly. Yes, that was exactly why she came. Without hesitation, the Duke pushed the divorce papers toward her. He ordered her to finish it quickly, then disappear. Serena looked at the documents. But before signing, she hesitated. Then she made a small request. The Duke's brows furrowed. Did she really think she still had the right to ask for favors? Serena quietly explained. It was nothing major. She simply wished to remain in the annex during the reflection period before leaving. Inside her mind, she admitted the real reason. Her savings were small. Finding a place immediately would be difficult. After a moment of silence, the Duke agreed. She could remain in the annex for the 3-month reflection period. That was the customary arrangement. He also added that alimony would be provided according to the law. Serena blinked in surprise. Alimony? Even after everything she had done? The Duke simply shook his head. He said he had never truly understood her. Not even after all these years. Serena lowered her gaze. Then she calmly signed the papers. Everything was finished. She stood up and said she would take her leave. The Duke impatiently told her to hurry and disappear. Serena walked toward the door. But just before leaving, she stopped. Then she glanced back. She told him something unexpected. During the reflection period, he did not need to worry about her. He was free to date whoever he wanted. The words struck him like a sudden blow. For the first time in a long while, the Duke was completely speechless. He simply stared at her departing figure, as if he could no longer understand the woman she had become. So Serena finally signs the divorce papers and walks away from the Duke, thinking she can finally escape the tragic story she's trapped in. But what she doesn't realize is that the role of the villainess is far from over. Very soon, a new secret will appear, one that could completely change her fate, or drag her even deeper into the nightmare. And now the real question is, can Serena truly break free from the story, or will fate force her to follow the same doomed ending? What do you think will happen next? Let me know in the comments, and don't miss part 2, where the story continues. If you liked the video, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching.